Hi again then guys, and welcome to yet another review and breakdown of one of the new DLC cars to arrive today on GranTurismo Sport. Today, of course, in relation to when this video is released, and this car is one which I'm very happy to see return, one of my favourite Japanese cars of all time. If you're talking specifically JDM, well then it might actually be my favourite of all time, but the Honda DC2 is pretty up there as well for me, so I'm not sure. I think the RX-7 might take it overall though. And so, of course, the question arises, what is this FD RX-7 like in the world of GT Sport? Has it been updated in the way of something like the Enzo to be better or worse or just an alternative? Or has it remained essentially the same as it was on GranTurismo 6? Because it costs exactly the same, of course it looks the same, but better, updated graphics, especially the interior looks so much better, the textures, all that kind of stuff. Well, in its stock form, you are of course looking at the twin rotor Wankel engine, a 1.3 litre, 292 horsepower, 245 pound-feet of torque. It weighs in at 1270 kilos, and you're looking at 230 horsepower per tonne. So the exact kind of specs that you would hope the car would have, of course. But what about when tuned? Because that is when the changes of GT Sport, be it a Skyline, an RX-7, an Enzo, whatever the case may be, having an existing car on that game could mean that we have a different interpretation of the car, not just in stock form, but also accentuated when tuned. That is the case here. Now the power is lower, quite a bit lower in fact, than it had on GT6. On there, you're looking at 686 horsepower. Now you're looking closer to around 600, so quite a bit less. At the same time though, it is still a very fast car for that power level. And of course, one of the great things about a rotary engine vehicle, as I've mentioned before, is that they are much faster in practice than their raw spec would suggest. In particular, the top speed on the RX-7 has always been much stronger than many other JDM cars of a similar power. So from that point of view, it is definitely a great performance car. There's no question there. It's very fast, both for acceleration in general and top-end speed. But what about the handling? What has GranTurismo Sport done to the RX-7? Well, I'm happy to say that I actually prefer this RX-7 on GT Sport to on GT6, because although the RX-7s are very good on GranTurismo 6, we recently of course ran through every single version of the RX-7 and narrowed down which ones were actually worth buying here on the channel, but even the best of those I would say doesn't feel as good as this one, and that's a great sign in terms of the handling feel, the driving manners, and also how authentic the handling feels. In particular, I would say is vastly better on this car. Stuff like suspension travel, the way that tyres give through corners, it just feels more realistic. And the funny thing is, you don't notice something like that until you go to a new game. And that's been the case with every racing game sequel that has ever happened. Or at least, hopefully it has, in terms of sims, especially though, or arcade sims. That is the case here. The car feels more authentic. And incidentally, I also feel that way about the R34 Skyline as well. That car feels, I would say, the best that it has ever felt in the GranTurismo franchise. And that's pretty high praise, I know, but I definitely feel that way. In the case of the RX-7, I don't feel like it has changed as much as the R34 has, in terms of my personal enjoyment, because I already love just driving the RX-7 for the fun of it. Whereas with the Skyline, that's never really been the case for me. I like driving it, it's a very good, a very capable car, but I've never found it to be as fun as something like a Supra or an RX-7 in particular. Now though, these cars do definitely feel better. The driver involvement is there more, you have more fun driving the car, you can get a feel for the car more, and even though I'm driving this one in fully tuned form, it doesn't feel difficult to drive at all. It's actually a very good handling machine. You can of course get the tail out, which is an RX-7 trademark. It's a great drift car, a great straight line machine, a great cornering machine. And although it can't reach the same kind of class limits as the Skylines with their around 800 horsepower and 900 horsepower to this one's 600, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because with that kind of power, the RX-7 wouldn't be quite as stable as they are, because they're heavier, they have all-wheel drive, those kind of advantages, whereas this is a pure, lightweight, rear-wheel drive sports car. So as such, it could start to get a little bit twitchy once you get up to that level. Nothing that you couldn't control, of course, and I'm not saying that I'd say no to having that, but even as it is, with around 600 horsepower, it definitely feels more than good enough, and this, for sure, is going to be a car that sees a lot of use from many players, myself included. It looks fantastic, the price tag is 40 grand, which is superb. It's actually even cheaper than stuff like the Ford Raptor, which makes the value for money excellent. And because of the fact that the RX-7 isn't quite as powerful as something like an R34 to begin with, you've got under 300 horsepower, the detuning ability on a car like this for online racing is also very good. Not of course for balance of performance, but for just normal online lobbies. It's a very responsive car to detuning and upgrading. Both ways it works really well because, as I alluded to earlier, the performance of a rotary car will more often than not outdo what its raw numbers will suggest. And in the case of the RX-7, I would say that is one of the best examples of that. This car with 600 horsepower can perform in the way that many cars with 700 or 800 horsepower would, or at least that you'd expect them to. So overall, definitely one of my favourite cars of the new pack. Of course, you should check it out. If you're an RX-7 fan, I think you might enjoy this one more than ever before. Likewise with the R34 Skyline, but we'll get to that one in due time. And overall, it's a great car. It's a great addition and a great return of one of the most iconic cars of the whole franchise. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.